everyone, it's Deborah Poneman, and it's great to be back. And it was great to take off these last 6 weeks and enjoy my summer with my family and friends. But I missed all of you. And since over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of discussion in my world about the idea of freedom. And having just been a guest on an event called the Freedom Extravaganza, I'm going to continue the discussion here. Now, when most people think about the great Austrian psychiatrist and psychotherapist Viktor Frankl, they don't usually think of the genius who developed the psychological approach known as logotherapy. Instead, they justifiably think of the Holocaust survivor who gave new meaning to the word freedom. In Frankl's classic book, Man's Search for Meaning, he famously said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. I'm sure you've heard that quote before. And Frankl was simply saying that each of us has total freedom, because freedom is not something dictated by our outer circumstances, but rather determined by our inner state. If Frankl could experience freedom in a concentration camp where the absolute worst of human depravity was inflicted on the inmates, can we not experience it when we feel trapped in a job or a relationship or some kind of life situation, and are more often than not prisoners of our own making? If we learn nothing else from Viktor Frankl, it's that freedom is a choice we have to make at every moment. And there is always a choice. So let's look at some things we might be able to do in our own lives to achieve the type of freedom that seems unobtainable by us mere mortals. First of all, if we want freedom, we need to have a purpose greater than ourselves. Now, one of the observations Frankl made was that the prisoners who survived had a purpose that inspired them to keep going no matter what. I guess you'd say a responsibility to something greater than themselves. For some, it was a child who they managed to send off to a country where they were safe and they hoped to be reunited with, or a spouse they believed they would be waiting for them once they were liberated. For others, it was something like an unfinished book or an unfinished piece of art or a scientific work that they had begun but not finished. They knew their contribution would make the planet a better place, and they needed to complete it before they died. So those who held a vision of what they wanted to create in the world, even if it just lived in their hearts at that time, were the ones who made it out alive. The vision gave them the courage to live and a sense of inner freedom. In his teachings, Frankl often refers to the words of Nietzsche, who said, "He who knows the why for his existence will be able to bear almost any how." Next, another thing we could do is what I call sharing your bananas. Okay, why do I call it sharing your bananas? Well, in my life, I've often worked and played amongst the wealthy and successful. I mean, I'm not BFFs with Warren Buffett or Elon Buffett, Warren Buffett or Elon Musk, although I did once go on a private safari with Richard Branson and his extended family. But I do have to say that the majority of my associates and most of my friends statistically are in the top 1% of the world's wealthiest individuals. But are they the most free? Although I hesitate to be the judge of how free they consider themselves to be, I'd say that some of the people I've grown to know and love who live in mud huts in Haiti are far more free. Why? Well, I believe the answer is illustrated in something that Marianne Williamson once said to me. I just returned home from a developing country, and I was telling her about my visit to a community of people who literally lived under tarps in a junkyard, but were so freaking happy. It just seems so incongruous to me. And she said this, she said, the reason these people are happy is that if they have 2 bananas, they will always give one away. The reason why so many people we know are so miserable is that they have all the bananas they want, but they have no interest in sharing them. Frankl saw men who had everything taken away from them, including their families, their homes, their livelihoods, their possessions. Even their names became numbers tattooed on their arms, but they never lost their freedom to share their bananas. Frankl once said, I have the quote here, he said, "We who lived in the camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offered sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." Frankl even recounted a time when a guard at great risk to himself secretly gave a piece of bread to Frankl. And Frankl said this about that. He said, "It was far more than the small piece of bread, which moved me to tears at that time. It was the human something that this man gave to me, the word and the look which accompanied the scrap of bread." So the next thing we could do if we really want to be free is to be what my mother used to call a decent human being. Yet, even though there were those who shared their figurative bananas in the camps, Frankl also shared the story of the senior warden who was a prisoner himself, but who beat other prisoners at even the tiniest indiscretion, leading Frankl to conclude that the mere knowledge that a man was either a camp guard or a prisoner tells us almost nothing. He said human kindness can be found in all groups, even those which as a whole it would be easy to condemn. Franklin speculates that there are really two types of people. I know he didn't get it from my mom, but two types of people: decent human beings and indecent human beings. And both can be found everywhere. They exist in every group and every society. I remember when my brother was accepted at Harvard University, and it was, my parents never went to college. My dad didn't even finish high school. My mother worked full time while going to high school because her mother had died, and they were sent off to live with some relatives anyway. It's a whole long story. And so when my brother was accepted at Harvard, it was a big deal. And all of the relatives and the neighbors came over to congratulate them. And I remember so clearly people saying to my mom, you know, "You must be so proud that Larry is going off to Harvard." And she said, "Yes, I'm very happy, but what's most important to me is that my children are decent human beings." I'll never forget it. Anyway, I look at people who are decent human beings as free human beings, and the people who aren't as captive human beings. Those who are bound by hate, they're not free. Those who can find a way to love and be decent human beings, even in the most unbearable circumstances, are free. And that's the type of freedom that each of us has the opportunity to experience every day of our lives. Frankl eventually concludes that there is no final answer to the question, what is the true meaning of life? He says that we all need to answer that question for ourselves. But he does say that life essentially tests us at every moment, and the answer is revealed in how we respond. He says that freedom is not found on some mountaintop, but is found daily and hourly in the choices that we make. And finally, he shares, we had learned in the camps ourselves, and furthermore, we had to teach the despairing men around us that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Something to ponder. Sending you tons of love. See you next week.